Learn how to quickly shade using pencil or pen. After the last lesson, you now have a trace. Mine looks like this, and you can download my version on the website if you'd like to follow along. The next step is shading, and one of the faster techniques is scribble shading. What I call scribble shading is making marks to make a tone. While a form of hatching, it is a messy, quick version of the far more controlled hatching and cross-hatching. I'll talk about cross-hatching in the next video. The difference between light and dark areas here will give us value. For example, I'm going to hide all these layers, except for value test, and I'll select value test and show that value test layer. And I'm going to be using an Apple Pencil here, and I'm going to use an HB pencil to start this. So that's under Sketching HB Pencil. And I'll use the cool blue-gray that we've been using in other lessons. And I tend to use that for pencil work. This kind of shading with an Apple Pencil has three factors: the width of the line, the pressure on the pencil, and the spacing between marks. Now, if I go to a low brush size and scribble lightly, I get a very different darkness than if I push it all the way up to 100%. And do that. Okay, so I'm getting different marks depending on what I do. Pressure kind of affects HB pencils, but not a lot, like you can see here. But there is a brush that does do that, and that's the 6B pencil. So I'm going to go switch over there, and you can see the 6B pencil, even on this medium setting I have, gives a little bit darker line. But if you press down, you'll see that it can get pretty dark. Okay, and if I go all the way up to the top here, you'll see the mark can change color very quickly depending on your pressure. Okay, I'm going to go back to my HB here, and I'm going to try something else, and that's spacing. So let's go scoot up a little bit here, and if I go like this and pull back, you can see that the line has a certain amount of value there. Okay, but if I zoom back into here, I can go back and forth very close together like this. And I can see that that line is much darker, and that shading area is much darker than what I did originally. So that's what you're going to be doing here. So let's go ahead and try this on a example piece here. So I'm going to go over here. Let's turn off value test. I'm going to go to the one that says sketch and turn that one on. And what I'm going to do is do a cylinder and ball that we've done in the past. So let's just zoom out here a little bit. And I'll start with a smaller size pencil, and I'm just going to make a cylinder like we've done in the charcoal lessons. Okay, and let's make a ball like so. Okay, so that's our basic shapes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the ball here, and I'm just going to scribble like this. And just go over my lines every once in a while. I might do a lighter one for some of this ball, and then go darker with higher pressure. I can even bring up my size of my brush here and do the same thing to get that. And I can do the same thing with the cylinder here. I'm going to start with this larger brush to start with. I'm just going to make a big scribble like this, then tighten it up in pressure and size. And keep doing that. I can do it over 3 times, and I'll do the same thing up on this top, so make this hollow. And we get the same kind of effect. I could use a different one if I want to get darker. I can use that 6B in there. And I can get some real highlights in there. Notice the 6B at that size makes for a pretty big mark. So I'm going to back it off a little bit so that I can do something like this. Okay. I can use the side of the pencil. I'm going to do it again with a 6B, but in the side of the pencil, you get a different kind of mark here. So you can do that with the Apple Pencil, is just put in some shading mark here. And this is also sensitive to pressure, so if you put a little bit more pressure on it, you can get some darker lines, which brings out the highlights on the pieces. And I'll do the same thing over here We'll start with a large 6B pencil for some shadow here. And then add in a little bit like this. Put the side of the pencil. And there you go. You can start to see how this all fits in together. And we might see that there's a little bit of shadow from that ball in there. So this can actually be a little darker. Like so. And you can even use a little bit of line here at times. And I tend to do that if you get a intersection or something. So you can do something like that. Okay, so you can see here, that's looking pretty good. With just a little bit of work, you can get a quick sketch out of something. Now, you can also use this to make more detailed sketches. So I'm going to zoom back in here. I'm going to turn off sketch here. Turn on trace fill, trace layer, and the reference photo. And now I'm going to do the little trace we did and show you how to do this with a bigger image and to get a more detailed thing. Now, I like to turn on here under prefs. Let's turn on reference. I'm going to scoot the size of this a little differently and zoom in on my reference photo so I have it handy to work with. I'm going to stick that up at the top because I'm going to zoom in a lot, okay? So I won't be able to see it. And I'm going to start over here with this bottle cap. I'm going to go back over to HB pencil. Do this all in HB pencil. And we'll start with about an 8% brush. And I'm just going to go up and down like this on this bottle cap. And you can get different textures depending on the way that you handle the brush. Now you'll see here, let's zoom in a little bit more. There's a lighter area here that I marked. So I'm going to go back over this on either side of that lighter area to get it a little darker. Like that, okay? And over here is a little darker, so I can put a little bit more in there. And then we can go into the bottle itself. Let's put this up a bit. There's actually a little bit of a lid here, so let's get that lip in there. And then we can start doing the same thing along this whole bottle. And just scribble in areas as we go. So this is an area that has a little bit of sauce on it. So that's going to be darker than the rest of the bottle. Okay. And I can go over lines here. So with the places where I see that there's a little bit more going on, I can just go back over it. Like down here, we've got sauce in the bottle. So that's going to get a little bit more lining here. And you can, of course, get a little more detail than to handle your lines. Though it really doesn't matter with the scribble because they're all going to go over each other. All right, and then I can do another bottle here. And do the second bottle the same way. This is going to be really, really dark because that's in shadow. So I'll be using high pressure on it. Let's get that one there too. We've got some dark area in here along this side of the bottle. And the whole bottle is pretty dark, so I can start to do something with that. Now notice I changed the angle of the line here, and that changes the character of the line so that it doesn't look like it's all the same line. And so by changing directions, you can start to see some of the changes that it's, okay, one bottle versus another bottle. So you can do that kind of thing. All right, so I did those two bottles. Let's do a little bit of the crate here. And for the crate, I actually suggest the direction the crate is going or the wood is going by drawing in that direction. So I'm giving far more of a suggestion of where the crate is. And I can do the same thing here. Now this one's, I actually went the wrong direction here. This should be a lot lighter, but I'm just going to deal with contrast here. So I can actually make the side of the carton a little bit lighter and I can still get away with it. Okay, I would go down like that. And then under there, there's some dark areas, like in here, which is the support for the crate. And that's in shadow, so that would be darker. And so would the one underneath it, which I can give the same kind of value. And again, just a couple of lines over this, a couple of lines over this to give value. And then do that with my cart. I'm using the side of the pencil here, so I sort of get those marks, but I'm going to undo that. And make like that. You can start to see again, we're getting there. So, all right, let's try something else here. I want to point out some of these things about these items. We can do the other bottle that we've been working on, that foreshortened bottle. And one of the tricks that I do here is I'm going to cover over the entire area, the top of this bottle. Now there is an area in here that I already marked right in here that's darker, and so once I marked one dark area, I can go in harder on those other dark areas and build up from there. Okay, so something like that. Again, I can do the same thing here on the side of the cap. And one side is darker than the other, so I'll go back over it like that. And keep working this bottle like that as I go down the bottle here. And this side is much darker, so let's go into here. And you're getting the idea. I'll go a light color here. I'll go really, really light, and I'm going to darken this just a little bit. There's a spot in here where there's a lot of reflected light. And sometimes when you get this, notice we got two little reflected light spots here. I'm actually going to use a little bit of eraser to catch those two spots. And I'll be able to see that a little better. You know, I might also do the same thing up here with an eraser and just scribble in a little bit of eraser mark there to get that reflection. All right, now we can keep going with this, but I'm going to go down to the flower because the flower's got a little bit different variation on this, and that is instead of the marks we've been making, I'm going to make radial marks. And this is great for a flower like this because what it does is it suggests the petals without having to draw every single petal. And there's nothing wrong with drawing every single petal, but it just does take a long time, so this is a lot easier, okay? And that sort of starts to give us a suggestion of petals. And then you keep going in that radial direction for the different shapes and shades that you're finding here. So for example, I got a much darker area up here, and which I can fill in, and a much darker area down here, and I've got some shade in the center of the flower, but this is really light, and I've got some shadow areas along here, inside some of those petals that I marked earlier, so I can start marking those in as I go. Okay, something like this. Okay, and you can start pulling out, and you'll start to see what we're getting at, and you can start to see some idea of how this will build your volume and make it look far more three-dimensional because of the shade and shadow. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and you can watch me finish it up. I'm going to speed up the video here so you can see this working, and you can get a much better view of how I'm going to go about doing the rest of this. So I'll finish up the flower, then move on to the vase. We'll finish off the crate, being careful to get that shadow behind the flower. I'll make the open areas of the crate dark. Then finish the last bottles. Zoom out and add some shadows for the crate and flower. And that's what we get for our final rendering. Now, for the challenge this week, I want you to try some of the earlier lessons photos, which you can find on the website, and try some quick sketches. Or you can go out and do some quick sketches from life while you're out somewhere. This method of drawing is great for getting quick sketches you might work for more detail later, or you may want to remember in some written notes. Also try taking a tracing like the one here and filling it with different values of scribble. If you do more tracings from the last video, you might want to try some of those as well. This was quick, and as I said, messier way of adding shading with pencils or pens. I also stayed with one color. Next week, I'll show you some neater hatching techniques using pen and pencil, and we'll find out what we can do with hatching on color.